Hello guys, so now we shall be discussing regarding the structures that are located in the floor of the third ventricle, okay, in the anterior as well as the inferior part of the floor of the third ventricle. So if you are watching this video for the first time, then all the structures which I will be drawing right now will be completely new to you, so I want you to watch the complete video. But if you already knew the pictures which I am about to draw, right, so in the starting itself you will understand whatever the pictures I will be able to draw. So when I write down the parts itself, you will understand what are the pictures I am going to draw. So you can just fast forward the video also, okay. So the topic of discussion today will be regarding the structures that are present in the anterior part of the floor of the third ventricle, okay. So the structures in the anterior part of floor of third ventricle. So what are the structures that are located in the anterior part of the floor of the third ventricle? The first of all, let me write down the structures and then I will draw the pictures, okay. So the first important structure which we shall be looking at here is the optic chiasma. So I hope you already know because many a number of times I have drawn this optic chiasma. So one is optic chiasma. So optic chiasma is present in the floor of the third ventricle. Floor of the third ventricle. What is the third ventricle? Which is called, what is called as a cavity of the third ventricle? Diencephalon. All of you know that diencephalon is consisting of thalamus and hypothalamus, right? So second important thing, after optic chiasm, the next important thing we have is a tuber cinereum. Tuber cinereum. After that, the third important thing we shall be having is our infundibulum. Infundibulum. Next, the fourth important thing we shall be discussing is the pars nervosa of the pituitary gland. Pars nervosa of the pituitary gland. Next, the fifth important thing we shall be discussing will be your mammillary bodies. And the final important thing is your posterior perforated substance. Posterior perforated substance, okay. So these are the structures which we shall be discussing now. Now, first important structure which we will be discussing right now is your optic chiasma. What is optic chiasma? All of you know optic chiasma is a part of thalamus or hypothalamus. Optic chiasma is a part of hypothalamus. And from where this optic chiasma is developed? Optic chiasma is developed from the diencephalon. Okay. Now, few important points over here. Optic chiasma. So what are these few important points? The first important point is optic chiasma is a part of your hypothalamus. Optic chiasma is a part of your hypothalamus, okay. So for example, if you look at the picture over here, see, for example, let us say this is a cavity of the third ventricle, okay. In this cavity of the third ventricle, you have got a sulcus that is dividing this cavity. This sulcus is called as hypothalamic sulcus. Hypothalamic sulcus that divides this entire third ventricle into two halves. One is called as a thalamus, another one is called as a hypothalamus, okay. So inferior part, right. So where is which part? The floor. Floor in the sense down here. So here this is the place where you have got your optic chiasma. Okay. So this is the place where your optic chiasma is located. Now tell me, where is optic chiasma located, in the thalamus or hypothalamus? Obviously it is located in the hypothalamus. Now from next important point over here is that this develops from diencephalon. This develops from diencephalon. So optic chiasma develops from diencephalon. Third important thing, within this optic chiasma, what is optic chiasma? Optic chiasma is nothing but the place where both the optic nerves partially dissociate. That dissociation point is called as optic chiasma. So first of all, we have to discuss some important points regarding this optic nerve. So optic, the name says it is optic nerve, but actually it is not a nerve. Okay, it is an extension of the forebrain. So what is this? All these things we shall discuss. Why optic nerve is not called as a true nerve, right? So what are the factors that are pointing towards telling that optic nerve is not a true nerve? Okay, optic nerve is not a nerve. So why it is not a nerve? Look here, optic nerve. So optic nerve, the first important characteristic point is that optic nerve is the extension of white matter of forebrain. Now tell me, a nerve is nothing but a neuron. Do you think a neuron is extension of white matter? No. But here this optic nerve is an extension of white matter of forebrain. It is an extension of white matter of forebrain. Extension of white matter of forebrain. Second important thing is that this optic nerve is not considered as a peripheral nerve. Okay, you know, cranial nerves are considered as a peripheral nerves because they exit out of the central nervous system, right? If you have watched my previous lectures, you will understand whatever I'm telling you that peripheral nerves are the nerves which will exit out of your central nervous system. For example, cranial nerves. Cranial nerves, they start in the brainstem and they exit out of your central nervous system, innervate into your different parts of your body. Okay, so this optic nerve also should be called as a peripheral nerve? No. So optic nerve is not called as a peripheral nerve, but it is considered as a tract. Okay. Optic nerve is considered as a tract, not a peripheral nerve. Not a peripheral nerve. Next, third important thing you need to know is that tract is comprising of what? Tract is comprising of nerve fibers or axons. Or axons. Okay. Next, fourth important thing, tell me one thing, that there are different nerves, right? Olfactory nerve you have got, trochlear nerve, oculomotor nerve, many nerves are there. Now tell me, are these nerves covered by meninges? No, but here this optic nerve is covered by meninges. Okay, so this optic nerve is covered by meninges. Optic nerve is covered by meninges. And fifth important thing is that where is this optic nerve present? This optic nerve is floating in the cerebrospinal fluid. Cerebrospinal fluid in the sense, where is it present? It is present in the subarachnoid space. So this is bathed or bathed by CSF. CSF is standing for cerebrospinal fluid. Next important thing is that, so these are some of the important things telling that optic nerve is not a nerve, it is a tract. Okay, it is what? It is considered as a tract. So what are the important things? Optic nerve is the extension of white matter of forebrain. Second important thing, optic nerve is considered as a tract, not considered as a peripheral nerve. Third important thing is that this optic nerve is covered by what? Meninges, and it is floating in the CSF. Okay. Next important thing you need to know is that, let us look at the picture of optic nerve, let us look at the picture of optic tract, as well as let us say your optic chiasma. Okay, so let us say that this is your eyeball on the right side, this is your eyeball on the left side. Okay, now the extension of the white matter, right? So extension of white matter is nothing but optic nerve. So these lines which I am drawing right now is your optic nerve. Okay, now what did I tell you? Optic nerve will join together to form optic chiasma and they cross over like this, right? So these structures which are coming out of this crossover is called as your optic tract. I will label all of them, just have patience for a minute. This is optic tract. And next important thing is that end of the optic tract you have got two bodies like this. So these two bodies over here are nothing but called as lateral geniculate bodies. So these two bodies over here are nothing but called as your lateral geniculate bodies, right? So what are the structures over here? See, these are your eyeball. Now within this eyeball, Here if you see, this part is called as retina. Here also you have got what? This is also called as your retina, right? Second important thing, first of all, let me mention this part. Let me mention this part, that this part over here is called as your optic nerve. Optic nerve. Next important thing, this part over here is called as your optic chiasma. Optic chiasma. And next, this part over here is called as your optic tract. Optic tract. And this part over here is called as your lateral geniculate body. Lateral geniculate body. So how many lateral geniculate bodies are there? One on the right, one on the left. In the same way, we also have got medial geniculate bodies. And tell me that till where this optic tract will extend, it will all the way extend till your occipital lobe. Okay. So for example, this is your occipital lobe like this. You see, this is your occipital cortex. Okay. So to this occipital cortex, what will happen is that from this lateral geniculate body, you see there are fibers that are running and touching this occipital cortex, right? So these fibers which are going and touching all the way this occipital cortex over here, these are nothing but called as your optic radiations. Okay. So these fibers are nothing but called as your optic radiations. So all these structures over here are nothing but called as your optic radiations. These are called as your optic radiations, right? Second important thing I want to tell you is that this pink color thing which I have drawn here is nothing but called as your retina. Now you know that this is the nose. See, this is the nasal region, right? So this retina is pointing towards the nose. That is why you call this part of retina as nasal retina. In the same way, you even have got retina on the sides like this. You see, you even have got retina on the sides. So this retina which is located on the sides is called as a temporal retina. So two different types of retina you have got. One is called as a nasal retina and the other one is called as a temporal retina. Now this nasal retina, what will happen is that the fibers are coming out of the nasal retina. The fibers are coming out of nasal retina, but they go on to the opposite side like this. Okay. Fibers coming from the left nasal retina also go opposite side like this. So where are they dissociating? The point where they are dissociating is what is called as your optic chiasma. Next important point is that, see, from here also, what is this part of retina? Let me write down these two parts of retina. So this part of retina over here is called as a nasal retina. Nasal retina. And this part of the retina over here is present towards the temporal side. So that is why you call this as a temporal retina. Temporal retina. Okay. Now from this temporal part of the retina also, you see fibers that are coming out, and these fibers are not going to the opposite side. These fibers are on the same side. Here also, you see the fibers that are coming out, they are not dissociating on the opposite side. They are going to lie on the same side. So tell me, are the two fibers crossing over? No. Only one group of fibers are crossing over. That is why you call this type of dissociation as partial dissociation. Okay, that is why you call this dissociation as partial dissociation. Partial dissociation. Okay, so that is why you call it as a partial dissociation. Now, here, what is this part here called as? This is your occipital lobe. What is your occipital lobe responsible for? Your occipital lobe is responsible for vision. That is why you also call this as visual cortex. You also call this as visual cortex. Right. Now what we will do is that, guys, what we will do is that we shall make a section like this at the level of optic chiasma. Okay. When we make a section and see, let us see what are the structures that are located after making this section. Okay. Now after making this section, this is how it looks. Here, this is the center. In the section, in this picture, you cannot see all the structures over here. Okay. But in this section which I am going to draw right now, in this particular section, you will see all the different types of pictures. For example, in the center, you have got a structure like this. Okay, these group of structures which are located in the center is called as a macular fibers. Okay, so these in the center you call them as macular fibers. Macular fibers. Okay, so next important thing is that above this macular fibers you have got another group of fibers like this, and below this macular fibers also you have got another group of fibers. Okay, so what are these fibers which are located above and below? So these fibers which are located above and below, the above and below fibers are called as nasal fibers. So this is called as upper quadrant nasal fibers, upper quadrant nasal fibers, and these are called as lower quadrant nasal fibers. So there are two different types of fibers. So one is called as upper quadrant nasal fibers, another one is called as the lower quadrant nasal fibers, right? So you are telling me these pink color fibers which are towards the nasal region are called as nasal fibers? Yes. So these are called as nasal fibers. Okay. Then what are these blue color things called as? These are called as temporal fibers because they are present on the temporal region, right? So they are called as temporal fibers. Now in this picture you have drawn nasal fibers, then where are these temporal fibers? So all of you look here, these are the temporal fibers like this. You see these fibers which I am drawing right now are nothing but called as your temporal fibers. So these fibers over here are called as your temporal fibers. These fibers over here are called as your temporal fibers. Okay, so one thing we have is called as the nasal fibers, and the other thing we have got is the temporal fibers. Now tell me, by looking at this picture over here, now tell me, are the nasal fibers crossing or are the temporal fibers crossing? Obviously the nasal fibers are crossing. So upper quadrant nasal fibers, these are also called as crossed fibers. Okay, lower quadrant nasal fibers are also crossed fibers. And remember one thing, the temporal fibers are crossed or uncrossed? They are uncrossed fibers. Then what about this macular fibers? Macular fibers are also crossed fibers. Macular fibers are also crossed fibers. Next important thing. If you see here, if you see this part, okay, if macular fibers, if I am drawing a line over here, this is called as the ventral half of the optic chiasma, and this is called as the dorsal half of the optic chiasma. Now, in the dorsal half of the optic chiasma, you see a structure like this. You see a band of fibers here. Where are these band of fibers located? These band of fibers are located in the dorsal half, right? So, these band of fibers are located in the dorsal half of your optic chiasma. So, these fibers which are located in the dorsal half of optic chiasma are nothing but called as your commissure. Okay, this is called as commissure of Guden. Okay, what is this? So this particular part over here is called as commissure of Guden. Gudden. This is called as commissure of Guden. Okay, so what are these? What do you mean by commissure of Guden? Previously we discussed about commissural fibers. Now what are these commissural fibers doing? Commissural fibers are joining the structures on the right cerebral hemisphere with the structures on the left cerebral hemisphere. They are acting like a bridging connections. Now tell me, are these commissures of Guden also a commissural fibers? No. These are not at all commissural fibers. Then what is the use of this commissure? It has got unknown connections. The connections are not yet known. Okay. So two things you have to write about these fibers are, one is, these are not commissural fibers. These are not commissural fibers. And second important thing over here is that they have got unknown connections. They have got what connections? They have got unknown connections. Clear? So these are not commissural fibers and they have got what? They have got unknown connections. So these are the structures which you can see from here. Okay. So these are the structures which you can see here. So what are the structures you can see here? You can see one very important thing that is called as a nasal retina. Okay. After nasal retina, you have got temporal retina. From the nasal retina, the fibers which are coming out are called as nasal fibers. These nasal fibers, they are crossing or they are being on the same side, they are crossing. Now next fibers are called as a temporal retina. Temporal retina, from the temporal retina you have got temporal fibers. Now these temporal fibers onto the same side. And by the way, what will happen? All of them finally they are entering into this lateral geniculate body, right? So this is your lateral geniculate body. Now this from this lateral geniculate body, you see these radiations that are coming out. These radiations over here are called as your optic radiations. Okay. Now next important thing over here is that these optic radiations over here, these are not considered as commissural fibers. And second thing, they have got what connections? They have got unknown connections. Third important thing over here is that if you make a cross section at this level, at the level of optic chiasma, in the center you have got macular fibers. Then why you did not show macular fibers here? Because here I cannot see the macular fibers. Okay. Next, on both the sides you have got two types of fibers. One is called as upper quadrant nasal fibers, another one is lower quadrant nasal fibers. All these fibers are crossed. On either sides in the temporal region you have got the temporal fibers which are uncrossed. Next important thing, if I am dividing this entire thing into two halves, the upper part is called as a dorsal and the lower part is called as a ventral part. The dorsal part is having this commissure called as commissure of Guden. So don't think that the name is commissure, but these are not commissural fibers, okay? And they have got unknown connections. Next important thing is that if you look at optic chiasma, let us figure out what are the structures that are located on the sides of optic chiasma, in the lower part and above the optic chiasma. Okay. Now before that if you look here on the lateral sides of optic chiasma, okay, see exactly this is optic chiasma. On the lateral side, on the right as well as on the left of optic chiasma, you have got two arteries. These two arteries are called as internal carotid arteries. Okay. So what are these two arteries over here? These are called as internal carotid artery. So these two arteries over here are called as your internal carotid arteries. Okay, right. Next important thing. Now let us draw the lateral surface. In the lateral surface, let us see what are the structures. Okay. So first, what I will do is that I will draw the medial surface and then I will show you where is your optic chiasma, and within that optic chiasma we shall draw some more structures over here. Okay. Right. So if you look at the medial surface and see what are the borders that are located in the front, back, lateral, medial and inferiorly and superiorly. Okay. So this part which I am drawing right now is called as your cerebral hemisphere. Okay. This is your cerebral hemisphere, and this cerebral hemisphere, this is a picture from the medial side. Right. So this is a picture which I am drawing from the medial side. Okay. Now here in the venital medial side, here you have got one very important structure like this. You see this particular structure which I am drawing right now is nothing but called as your corpus callosum. Okay. What is this structure by the name? This structure is called as corpus callosum. Now this corpus callosum is having few parts. For example, this red color part which you can see right now over here, this part is called as the genu of corpus callosum. Next, the tail end also you can see one more important thing. This is called as the tail of, or you can call it as a splenium of the corpus callosum. Okay, so two important things over here. What are those two important things? So this part over here is called as a genu of corpus callosum. This part over here is called as your what is this part called as splenium of the corpus callosum. This is called as a splenium of the corpus callosum. Next important, between the genu as well as between the splenium, between the genu and the splenium, you see this entire part which I am shading right now. This part is called as a body of your corpus callosum. Okay, this entire part is called as your body of the corpus callosum. So this part over here is your body of corpus callosum. So three important parts: genu, splenium as well as the body of corpus callosum. Now down here you have got a structure in this way, right? So what is this particular structure? This particular structure which I have drawn over here is called as what? This is called as a fornix. Okay, so this particular structure is called as your fornix of corpus callosum. So these things I have discussed this again and again. right? Now you might be wondering why I'm drawing again the picture. So these pictures I'm drawing only for the new students who are watching this video for the first time. If you already knew this picture, then again I'm telling you, you can just fast forward the video. Okay, right? So this is your fornix. And second important thing over here is that here you have got a structure between the fornix as well as the body of the corpus callosum. So this structure which I'm drawing right now here is called as your septum pellucidum. Okay, so what is this structure over here? This structure is called as your septum pellucidum. Okay, this particular structure over here is nothing but called as your septum pellucidum. Next, down to the genu, you have got the genu. Down to the genu, you have got another important structure like this. Okay, so this structure which is located down to the genu over here, this particular part is called as a rostrum. What is this particular part called as? This particular part is called as the rostrum of the corpus callosum. Now down to the rostrum of the corpus callosum, you have got another important structure like this. This particular structure is called as linea. What is this? Lamina terminalis. Okay. You see this particular structure? This is called as what? This is called as lamina terminalis. So this particular one over here is called as lamina terminalis. Lamina terminalis. Okay. Next important thing over here is that down to this lamina terminalis, down to your lamina terminalis, you have got another structure which is rounded like this, you see. So this rounded structure which is located down to lamina terminalis is what is the main topic today, that is your optic chiasma. Now if I ask you what are the structures located above the optic chiasma, what will you tell? By looking at this picture, you have to tell that what are the structures that are located above the optic chiasma. One is called lamina terminalis, another one is called as a rostrum. Now, if I ask what are the structures that are located below, if I ask what are the structures that are located posterior to it, also you should be able to tell. Now, back to this optic chiasma, you see this blue color structure over here. This is called as optic tract. Okay, from this picture itself, it is very clear. So, this is your optic chiasma. Back to optic chiasma, behind the optic chiasma, what do you have? Optic tract. So the same thing I am drawing it from the side view. Optic chiasma, back you have got this optic tract. Okay. Next important thing over here is that exactly near this optic tract, you have got two more structures like this. You see, this is one structure here. So what is this structure which I am drawing right now? This is nothing but called as your tuber cinereum. So if I ask what is the structure located behind the optic chiasma, you have to tell optic tract, obviously, after that tuber cinereum. Okay, right. So this particular part over here is your optic chiasma. This particular part over here is your optic chiasma, and behind that, this part over here is called as your tuber cinereum. Tuber cinereum. Okay. Next important thing, attached to this tuber cinereum, you have got another important structure like this. This is what is called as your pituitary stalk. Now you might be thinking, this picture, in this picture near the mandible, do you have pituitary gland? No, actually I just wanted to tell you that this is how the picture is visualized. So the sizes might differ, but the picture is right. Okay. So here you have got this particular long elongated stalk like structure. This is what is called as your optic, what is this called as? This is called as your pituitary stalk. Pituitary stalk. What is the other name for pituitary stalk? This is also called as infundibulum. This is called as infundibulum. Now attached to this pituitary stalk, you have got another important structure. You see, this particular structure is called as pars nervosa. Okay, so attached to this you have got another important structure. This particular one over here is called as your pars nervosa. Pars nervosa. So what is this pars nervosa? Pars nervosa is nothing but called as your posterior pituitary gland. Posterior pituitary gland. What is your posterior pituitary also called as? Neurohypophysis. 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 Okay. Now, next important thing, if you very clearly visualize here, see this part which I am drawing right now is your skull cap. Okay, so this is your skull cap, and this skull cap all the way hangs down over here, and don't forget that here you have got your anterior pituitary, and this part of the skull is called as a sphenoid bone. Now this sphenoid bone will completely overlap this pituitary gland over here in this manner, right? So this is how it is overlapping. Now this entire part which you can see right now is called as your sella turcica of your sphenoid bone. Okay, all of you know that within the sphenoid bone you have got a part called as sella turcica, right? When you look at the skeleton, in that you have got sphenoid bone. Now if you look at the sphenoid bone, in the center of the sphenoid bone you will have a small depression. That depression is called as sella turcica. Within that depression you have got this particular part called as neurohypophysis as well as adenohypophysis, which is also called as anterior pituitary. So this one is your anterior pituitary. See, this is your anterior pituitary gland. Anterior pituitary gland. Okay, now this is all clear to you. Next important thing is that behind this tuber cinereum you have got another important structure called as mammillary body. Okay, so this is what is called as your mammillary body. Now behind this mammillary body you have got another important structure like this. This particular structure over here is called as your posterior perforated substance. Right, anyways, I just don't want to go in detail of these parts over here. When I discuss about tuber cinereum and the remaining structures, that time again I will draw this picture, and at that time I will go in detail, okay. But for now, only regarding this optic chiasma, you have to know only this is the picture over here. And also I am telling you one more thing, that here you have got something called as pineal gland. Just don't remember it. I am just drawing it. I will draw this in a detailed picture. So dividing into laminae. So this is how the laminae goes and attaches over here. Okay, here you have got two commissures like this. So this entire cavity which you can see over here, is what is called as your cavity of the third ventricle or cavity of the diencephalon. Cavity of the third ventricle or cavity of your diencephalon. So this is what is called as your cavity of third ventricle or cavity of your diencephalon. Okay. So this is your cavity of the third ventricle or cavity of diencephalon. Now, so here this part over here is your optic chiasma. Now by looking at this picture, optic chiasma. Now covering the surface of the brain, what do you have? You have got dura mater. See, this is the dura mater which is covering the surface of the brain. But one very important thing is that by the time the dura mater reaches your optic chiasma, see, by the time your dura mater reaches the sella turcica, dura mater is forming a kind of roof-like thing over the sella turcica, right? So this part over here is called as your sella turcica of the sphenoid bone. Sella turcica of the sphenoid bone. So don't you think that this dura mater is extending and forming a roof over the sella turcica, right? So this extension of dura mater, which is forming like a roof over the sella turcica, is called as diaphragma sellae. Diaphragma sellae. What is this diaphragma sellae doing? It is forming the roof of your pituitary gland. Now, important thing to remember. Important thing you need to know is that looking at this optic chiasma, first of all, let us discuss what are the structures that are located laterally. What are the structures that are located lateral to the optic chiasma? Now, if this is optic chiasma, laterally on the right and left, what structures I have got? I have got two internal carotid arteries, one on the right and one on the left, right? So I have to write it as I have got right and left internal carotid artery. Right and left internal carotid artery I have got. After this, posteriorly, what do I have got? Posteriorly on the back. Okay, so posteriorly, what do you have got? Look here. If this is your optic chiasma, look here. Posteriorly, what do you have got? Posteriorly, what do you have got? Posteriorly, you have got tuber cinereum, right? Just attached to this tuber cinereum, what is this? This is called as your infundibulum or also called as pituitary stalk. So posterior to this optic chiasma, two structures you have got. One is called as the tuber cinereum. Attached to the tuber cinereum, you have got this structure called as pituitary stalk. Okay. So posteriorly, what do you have got? You have got One is you have got tuber cinereum, and the next important thing you have got is the infundibulum. Infundibulum, or what is the other name? That is a pituitary stalk. Pituitary stalk or infundibulum. Next, after the posterior is done, next inferiorly what do we have? Inferiorly, what are the structures you have got? Just look here. Inferiorly, down here. Down here, what do you have exactly? Down here, there is only one structure that is located, that is diaphragma cellae. And just below down to diaphragma cellae, what do you have? Pituitary gland. You see this? So, this is your optic chiasma. Down here, what do you have? Two structures. One is diaphragma cellae, and down here you have got pituitary gland. So, these are the structures that are located inferior to your optic chiasma. What are the two structures inferior? One is called as diaphragma cellae. So, these things, either if you want, you can remember it just like this, or by looking at the picture, I think it would be easy if you remember. Okay, diaphragma cellae as well as a pituitary gland. Pituitary gland as well as your diaphragma cellae. Now, what I am trying to tell you is that, for example, whenever there is pituitary adenoma in the sense tumor of the pituitary gland. So, whenever there is pituitary adenoma, the pituitary adenoma will grow in size like this, and this pituitary adenoma will go and compress your optic chiasma. In this picture, I have drawn in such way that the optic chiasma is far away from the pituitary gland, but no, they are very near to each other. Okay. So that is why I am telling you, pardon me for this picture over here because of the different sizes, but actual thing is that the pituitary gland is located very nearer to the optic chiasma. So whenever a case where the patient is having pituitary gland adenoma, the adenoma will increase in size and go and suppress your optic chiasma. So that is the time when the patient will have problems with the vision. Okay, so if a patient is having problems with the vision with no proper history and all, right, then you need to do an MRI. When you do an MRI, you can very clearly see that there is a pituitary gland adenoma, right? So obviously, how do you resect the pituitary gland adenoma? Transsphenoidal surgery. From the nose, you approach to the pituitary gland and remove that tumor. Okay, right. So this is what the thing you can do over here, right? So let us just discuss what are the things we have so far discussed regarding this optic chiasma and all. So here, structures that are present in the anterior part of the floor of the third ventricle, we discussed about optic chiasma. Now what we shall discuss is that we shall discuss all these structures at a single time and discuss that all these structures are forming the floor. Okay. Next, in this optic chiasma is a part of the hypothalamus, develops from the diencephalon. So optic nerve is not a true nerve. It is not considered as a peripheral nerve. It is considered as a tract. So it is the extension of the white matter of the forebrain. Tract is comprising of nerve fibers. Optic nerve is covered by what? It is covered by meninges. Next, bathed by CSF. Next important thing over here is that within this optic nerve, if you see, right, so this is the nasal half of the retina and this is the temporal half of the retina. From the nasal half of the retina, you see the fibers are coming and crossing. But from the temporal half, do you think the fibers are crossing? No, the fibers are ipsilateral like this. And lateral to the optic chiasma, what do you have? You have got internal carotid artery, right? And both of them, they will rely on what? Lateral geniculate body. And from the lateral geniculate body, you see the fibers coming and entering into your occipital cortex, or also called as a visual cortex. So these are called as occipital radiations, right? Optic radiations. Next important thing is that if you look this structure over here, these are called as the macular fibers in the center, which are crossed. Above this, there are upper quadrant nasal fibers, down here lower quadrant nasal fibers. These two are also crossed. Next, here you have got the temporal fibers which are uncrossed. Okay, and down here you have got a commissure called as commissure of Guden. This commissure of Guden is not the true commissural fibers, and they have got unknown connections. Next important thing over here is that, so what are the structures that are present laterally? Laterally you have got internal carotid arteries. Next, posteriorly what do you have? Posteriorly you have got tuber cinereum as well as the infundibulum. Next important thing, inferiorly what do you have? You have got diaphragma cellae and the pituitary gland. Okay, so these are the structures regarding the optic chiasma, guys. So the first part of the the first part in the floor of the third ventricle, that is optic chiasma. Next we shall discuss all these structures in a single picture. Okay, so thank you so much for watching my video. Goodbye. So guys, previously we were discussing regarding the optic chiasma, right? So previously we discussed regarding the optic chiasma. Now what I will do is that I will draw a detailed picture. So this was the, I mean almost like this, right? But I haven't discussed the structures which are located on the back, right? So what I will do is that I will draw the complete picture where all these 6 structures would be seen. Okay, so your tuber cinereum, infundibulum, pars nervosa, mammillary bodies, posterior perforated substance, all of them will be seen in a single picture. Okay, so let us just look at that picture and see what are the things we could discuss over here. So if I am drawing the medial surface of the cerebral hemisphere, this is how it looks, right? So if I am drawing the medial surface of the hemisphere, this is how it looks. This is how it looks, right? Now here, exactly over here, you have got a structure like this. This structure over here is called as your corpus callosum. I have already talked about this. I also told you 2 important things. I told you that this part over the corpus callosum is called as gyno, and this part over here is called as your splenium. This was a thing which I already spoke, right? So I'm not mentioning those things because I have already mentioned about the gyno and the splenium over here. Next, I have also told you that here we have got a structure like this. This is called as fornix. Next important thing over here is that this particular structure over here is called as your septum pellucidum. This particular structure over here is called as your septum pellucidum, right? Now beneath this septum pellucidum, you have got not septum pellucidum, beneath the gyno, here you have got a structure like this. This one over here is called as a rostrum. This was a thing which I have told previously. Now beneath the rostrum, you have got one more structure, you see. This one more structure which is lying down beneath this rostrum. This part over here is called as your lamina terminalis. Okay, what is this called as? This is called as lamina terminalis. Now beneath the lamina terminalis over here, you have got your optic chiasma. This was the till here we have discussed in the previous class, right? So here you have got your optic chiasma. This one over here is called as your optic chiasma. Now behind your optic chiasma, this part till here, you call this as an optic tract. Okay, this is called as your optic tract. Next, we discussed, another important thing is that here if you see very carefully, 2 important structures. See, one structure which is coming all the way like this is called as what? This is called as your tuber cinereum. Now the tuber cinereum will meet together and they form a structure which is like this. This is called as medial eminence. Okay, so what is the thing which I have written over here? So this particular thing is called as your tuber cinereum. Tuber cinereum and tuber cinereum together formed what? It formed medial eminence. It formed medial eminence. Now down to this tuber cinereum, you have got another important structure like this. This structure is nothing but called as your infundibulum or pituitary stalk. Okay, so this thing over here is called as your infundibulum or pituitary stalk. Or pituitary stalk. Infundibulum or pituitary stalk. Now attached to this infundibulum or pituitary stalk, you have this particular structure. This is called as pars nervosa. Okay, so what is pars nervosa? Pars nervosa is nothing but called as your posterior pituitary or neurohypophysis. So your pars nervosa is called as pars nervosa or you can call it as posterior pituitary or you can call it as neurohypophysis. Neurohypophysis. Okay. Now attached to this pars nervosa over here, we have got another important structure called as adenohypophysis or anterior pituitary. Okay. So this structure over here is called as anterior pituitary or adenohypophysis. Anterior pituitary or adenohypophysis. Okay, right. Next important thing is that behind this, we have got another important structure like this. This part over here is called as your mammillary body. Okay, so this particular part over here is called as your mammillary body. This particular part over here is called as your mammillary body. Okay, now next important thing, behind this mammillary body you have got another important structure like this. Behind this mammillary body you have got another important structure. So what is that important structure? See here, behind this mammillary body, here you have got a substance in this way. You see a substance that is located behind your mammillary body. How many mammillary bodies you have got? You have got two mammillary bodies. One is called as a right mammillary body, another one is called as a left mammillary body. So behind this mammillary body you have got this substance like this. This substance over here is called as posterior perforated substance. Okay, so this substance over here is called as your posterior perforated substance. Now behind the posterior perforated substance, this is the place where your midbrain is located. So this is your midbrain. Okay, and remember one thing that exactly in the center of your midbrain, okay, let us say this entire part is your midbrain like this. Okay, so exactly in the center of your midbrain you have got one more important structure. Okay, so it is all the way like this. Exactly in the center like this you have got one more structure in this way. Okay, so this structure which is transversing the midbrain like this, right, or diagonally, this structure over here is called as aqueduct of Sylvius or cerebral aqueduct. So all of you know what is cerebral aqueduct, right? So this is called as your cerebral aqueduct. Now one very important thing to remember is that anything above the cerebral aqueduct, you call this as a tegment of the midbrain. So above the cerebral aqueduct, in the sense this part. Okay, so this part which you can see over here, this is where it is located. It is located above the cerebral aqueduct, right? So that is why you call this as a tegment of the midbrain. This is called as tegment of the midbrain, right? Next, above the tegment of the midbrain, this particular part where you can see this one, this particular part is called as the subthalamic tegment of the midbrain. Why it is called subthalamic, I will tell you, right? But before that, you need to look here one more important thing, that here we have got a gland called as pineal gland. So what is the name of this gland over here? This gland is called as pineal gland. This is called as your pineal gland. Okay. Next, attached to the pineal gland, you have got a stalk. This stalk over here is called as pineal stalk. This stalk over here is called as your pineal stalk. Pineal stalk. Next, after this pineal stalk will actually divide into two laminae. One laminae going on the top, that is called as a superior laminae. One laminae going on to the bottom, that is called as a inferior laminae. Now this superior lamina, what will happen is that this superior lamina will come anteriorly forward, then goes posteriorly back, and again comes anteriorly forward and attaches like this. Okay. Now when it comes to inferior laminae all the way comes and attaches here. Now to the superior laminae and to the inferior laminae, there are two important things. What are those two important things? See, here there is one very important thing near the splenium, and there is another important thing down here also. So this structure which I am drawing over here, this is called as habenular commissure. Habenular commissure. Okay. After that, this particular structure over here is called as your posterior commissure. So how many commissures do we have? We have got two important commissures. One is called as a habenular commissure, another one is called as a posterior commissure. And next important thing is that if you can see that this is the pineal stalk dividing into superior lamina and inferior laminae. So exactly this part, you see this part, this recess which is located between superior and inferior laminae, this is called as pineal recess. Pineal recess. Next, above the pineal recess, you see this recess over here, this gap. right? So this gap or recess, whatever you can see above the pineal recess, this is called as suprapineal recess. This is called as suprapineal recess. And this entire cavity which you can see over here, you see this entire cavity, is called as a cavity of the third ventricle. Okay, so this entire cavity over here is called as your cavity of the third ventricle. So within this entire cavity, within this cavity of the third ventricle, this is your cavity of the third ventricle or diencephalon. What I will do is that I will actually divide this entire cavity into two portions like this. Okay, so what are these two portions? One portion is above this line, one portion is below this line. First of all, what is the name of this line over here? This line is called as hypothalamic sulcus. Hypothalamic sulcus. So hypothalamic sulcus is dividing the third ventricle into the upper part, that is called as a hypothalamus, and the lower part is called as a hypothalamus, which means this part over here is called as a thalamus and this part over here is called as your hypothalamus. So one is called as your thalamus and the other one is called as your hypothalamus over here. Right, now let us see what are the structures which are present over there. Now what is this? This entire yellow color shaded portion is called as a third ventricle. Now in this entire third ventricle, this particular part is called as a floor of the third ventricle, right? So in this floor of the third ventricle, what structures we have discussed over here? One is optic chiasma. See, where is optic chiasma located? In this picture, see, this part over here is called as optic chiasma. Behind optic chiasma, what do we have? We have got tuber cinereum, right? So behind optic chiasma, we have got tuber cinereum. Attached to tuber cinereum, what do you have? We have got infundibulum. Attached to infundibulum, what do we have? Pars nervosa of the pituitary, right? If you remember here again, this green color part is called as a pars nervosa of the pituitary gland or neurohypophysis. So the tuber cinereum, see here, this is tuber cinereum. Attached to tuber cinereum, infundibulum. Attached to the infundibulum, you have got this pars nervosa. So all these three structures are in continuous, right? Now behind that, what do we have? Behind that, what do we have over here? We have got mammillary body. See here, behind what do we have? We have got mammillary body over here. Behind mammillary body, what do we have? We have got posterior perforated substance. Let us see where is that. Yeah, this is a posterior perforated substance that is located. So all are these. If someone is asking you what are the structures that are forming the anterior-inferior part of the floor of the third ventricle, then all these are the structures that are forming the floor of the third ventricle. Okay, so this is very important, you have to know. So these are the structures that are forming the floor of third ventricle. So first we discussed much more detailed about this optic chiasma, and after that these are the structures which you can see over here, right? Now if I ask you anterior to mammillary body, what do you have? You have got tuber cinereum, you have got infundibulum, you have got pituitary stalk, pituitary gland, I mean the pars nervosa, the posterior part of the pituitary gland. If I ask you behind, posteriorly to mammillary body, what do we have? We have got posterior perforated substance. So in this way you need to change the question. So if you just look at this picture, it would be easy for you. Okay, so this is all you need to know regarding the structures that are forming the floor of the third ventricle, guys. So thank you so much for watching my video. Goodbye.